everyone. Thank you for joining this morning panel. It's great to have such a fortunate list of speakers around the table. So I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land, who are the Gadigal people here in Sydney and where we are meeting today. I pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend my respect to the Aboriginal Torres Straits Islanders people. Good morning, everybody, and I'm very fortunate to have these 5 speakers from all over the world. We have Johanna Durand from the Alliance Française in Melbourne. Hello, Johanna. We have Greg Whitehead from the Queensland Chamber Orchestra in Brisbane. We have Elaine Chia from the festival, Adelaide Festival in Adelaide. Hello, Elaine. And back to France, we have Nicolas Moreau from the Architecture Agency. So thank you very much for joining us today. I will start with a short introduction by each one. So because I know you from last year, Elaine, I will start with you. So can you make a short introduction about you, where you are, and what's your role at the Adelaide Festival?
Great, thank you, Corinne. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here to join you. I'm coming to you from Ghana land in Adelaide, and I'm want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I have the very great honour of being the Executive Director of the Adelaide Festival. I joined the festival just on 7 months ago. I started the job during COVID, which was a very interesting way to move to a city, but it's obviously really exciting to be in Adelaide, but it's a very, very challenging time, not just for us here, but for everyone in the world. Previous to that, I spent 4 years as the CEO of the City Recital Hall in Angel Place in Sydney, which is a 1,200-seat concert hall. And I've been very fortunate to have spent a lot of my working career travelling the world. I spent 5.5 years working on a project at the Venice Biennale in Italy across art and architecture. So I'm very excited about this topic around livable cities, because I've had the very great privilege of living in many of them and also experiencing them.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Craig, do you want to continue by the introduction?
Yeah, thank you. Craig Whitehead, Chief Executive of the Queensland Symphony Orchestra. I also pay my respects to the elders, past, present, emerging. I come from Yagara and Turrbal country, from Brisbane today. Look, I've spent over 20 years working in the performing arts, the last 12 years in running orchestras, leading orchestras. And my particular focus and my particular brief, if you like, in working with the Queensland Symphony Orchestra is how do we make an orchestra indispensable to its community? How do we find a way where we can make it accessible, we can make it relevant, not just to those who normally come to concerts, but to the broader community, and for it to become a servant, if you like, to the people within the community, not just in Brisbane, but we also have the remit to provide orchestral services across the state. A state which is the most decentralised and one of the largest states in Australia. So huge land mass with a significant number of people spread across large distances.
Right, thank you very much, Greg. Do you want to continue, Nicolas?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel discussion. So I am an architect based in Paris. I'm leading a firm with my partner Hiroko Kusunoki, which is Japanese. And we started our career in Japan, in Tokyo, working for great master architects such as Shigeru Ban, Sana, or Kengo Kuma. For today, we have about 25 people working on mostly cultural projects, such as museum or theater in France or abroad, such also the Guggenheim in Helsinki, or House of Culture in Memoria in French Guiana. And and especially the powerhouse in Parramatta, which is currently in development. So we have a lot of nationalities, more than 15 nationalities working with us. So it's very international, small atelier. And we enter to the culture program mostly by participating in open national or international competition. So yes, that's pretty it.
Thank you very much. We finish with you, Johanna, in Melbourne at the Alliance Française.
Thank you very much, Corinne, and hello everybody. I'm Johanna Durand. I was born in Aix-en-Provence, which is the city of the Festival d'Art Lyrique, the opera festival that Elaine knows very well, and we've been collaborating with the Adelaide Festival. I've worked in cultural and scientific cooperation for 20 years, including in Mexico, Southern Africa, and France. And it's a year now that I am the general manager for the Alliance Française in the most livable city, Melbourne. I'm passionate about art, design, and architecture, and my dream is to see a giant public performance to celebrate Melbournians united together. So hopefully in the coming years.
Well, thank you very much. We know that art and culture are shaping creative cities, and that's really the topic of today. The unspoken success factors for livable cities. So I know we've done a lot into each of you has worked a lot with their local community. Can we start with you, Johanna? Can you explain what would be for you inclusiveness and diversity, and what is your experience into this scope?
Sure. It's true, art and culture shape attractive cities and create a space for citizens and artists' expression by contributing to a sense of belonging and a community, supporting the collective well-being and resilience. It also promotes public debate and unity in a community. It's also a very important economical factor to attract tourists, students, citizens, and to create jobs. So it's a vital part of the heart of the cities.
Do you have a big example to give us of what, from your experience, past experience, what you've seen like one of the most successful experience in France?
Sure. Actually, it's not in France, the one I've lived. It's in South Africa, where we had a French company called Gratte-Ciel. It means skyscraper. And we had this company coming to do a public performance in Durban, in the streets. And it was aerial, sorry. In the streets with angels and feathers coming from the sky, like an acrobatic circus involving all the citizens. And I think there was about 50,000 citizens, and it was the first time, the mayor said, it's the first time we see all the South African communities together around an event. And it really there is a before and after this show for the city of Durban that was really, really impressive and immersive as an experience for all people.
Elaine, to your experience, what would be how do you measure the impact of such a big experience, a successful event? How would you measure it, and how would you say the return on investment is positive?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. I think for me, the governments will always try to measure economic impact. Of course, that's very important across visitation and spend, and of course, that's really important. But I think that there are more intangible but impact sort of measures that we are all working with in the cultural sector, which is around social and cultural impact, the pride in a city, the visual beauty of a city, the activations that stimulate conversations and cultural conversations and dialogues that give give the intellectual but also the community sense of learning about each other and what diversity really means and how that contributes to the way we live and what we think and our contribution to society. And I think that those measures, which are, as I said, at times intangible, but really actually quite tangible, because we all know when we're living in a livable city, the success factors are very, very obvious, because you can see it in the sense of well-being in people. You see it in the sense of the draw card of people wanting to flock to meeting places. They feel that their city is alive, whether it's through public art or architecture. There is a sense of that success factor, but it doesn't come just alone. I think festivals obviously contribute a lot to it, but it's what you do. Where Adelaide Festival is 17 days of the year, what happens for the other days of the year that contribute to that sense of well-being and livability that we can celebrate at festival time?
Greg, I think what Elaine just said must resonate a lot for you, because, I mean, in your introduction, you said that you want to reach this broader community. So how does its, visual beauty and sense of well-being of the community, how do you make it work in Brisbane?
Look, it's a range of different ways, and the way we look at it is that there's a really strong role we can play from an education perspective, and the cultural infrastructure that an orchestra provides to a city, the musical infrastructure, with 80 full-time musicians who are spending their time when they're not performing with the orchestra, with their own teaching students or teaching in high schools or tutoring, lecturing at the universities, working with the youth orchestra, working with community choirs and community groups, having their own musical life in chamber groups. They kind of create this sense of a musical community because of who they are and the inspiration that they provide to others. So there's that education component. There's the inspiration of having, world-class artists living and working within a city and engaging on a day-to-day basis with the community. There's also that sense of the opportunity for participation as well, where people can not only be entertained passively by coming along to performances, but also feel engaged, connected, and have an opportunity to, whether they be students or amateur musicians, when we have a program which is a day in the orchestra, where people can come and play alongside professional musicians and take their love for classical music from a passive to an active and interactive place. And again, that just builds a sense of belonging, a sense of achievement, and a sense of community within. And particularly during this time of COVID-19, I think around the world, we've seen the value of the arts, we've seen the value of music. We've got a video to show a little bit later on about the work that QSO has done for those who are most vulnerable, elderly members of the community, and making a connection with them and lifting their spirits up. But I'm incredibly moved by the images of musicians and others in Italy, for example, playing on their balconies to each other, singing and creating these impromptu choirs and impromptu orchestras, and they found a way to connect through music, which no doubt made the lockdown in Italy just a little bit more bearable.
Do you think the music and everything which is associated with performing arts is more powerful at these moments than visual arts?
I think it is, and I think it's because of the capacity to share it with others, and it's difficult. We've been able to find that by using digital media, we've been able to have our online listening parties with audiences, and where we will have a Spotify playlist that we'll send out, but we have a Zoom meeting where we can have a conversation with a musician about the music that they're hearing. So there are ways in which you can still be interactive and have a sense of community and shared experience, even in a digital world. It's not as good as being in a concert hall, but it is providing some relief.
Nicola, I mean, there's all this what Elaine, Craig, and Joanna are explaining in terms of immersive and engaging the audience. How does it resonate when you are an architect? How do you shape your city to make it more engaging for everyone?
The truth is, making a museum in a city or in a new district is really like urban catalyst. So it really accelerates somehow one part of the economy. So the real estate market is booming. It's also this economical part that architecture is linked to politics and economic. But what we try to do as an architect is to bring somehow a poetic dimension, a sense, I just said, a sense of beauty. I totally agree with this. It helps people to identify themselves to the district by being proud of living here where there is this extraordinary space that they can share. So yes, there is here a very important responsibility and excitement when designing such cultural facilities. And also what we try to think about is how we can create places which are open to everyone by what we call making in-between spaces where people are able to get into the place free tickets, and they can here like make an organic extension of the city. And here they can create what is a community life, engage with art, discover art, get access to art. And this is what we believe is very important and in the success of the cities. Yes.
Yes. So, Nicola, can you explain, because you're very much into the museum sphere, and what's happening now is that everybody is outside. So, how do you continue to building a sustainable city?
Are you meaning because of COVID?
Yes.
Yes. So the point is like it is. Well, the tools, like today we are still working thanks to video conference, and it's working pretty well, even if the process of creation needs interaction that is alive, because there is accidents that happens and we need sketches, we need this direct communication. So we are managing more or less, but I guess from the architecture results, the COVID-19 is it doesn't have a direct immediate impact, since architecture or urbanism is a very slow process. So but it also kind of solidification of the society and the culture. So it will appear somehow.
So can you give us some tips about Parramatta already, because we are all Australian and we would like to know more about this project and how well it's going to be, part of the city.
It is, but first it is facing Parramatta River, and it is in this axis which is driving directly to the train station. So it will create a bridge, a link between the river, which is really the historical part of Parramatta, where the hills, where the people used to fish hills and used to gather. So there is this space that we wanted to create, which is an empty space, a void facing the river. So the building is set back to release the place and to somehow bring it back how it used to be, a gathering place. So there is this very large hall, the main chamber, which is 3,000 square meters, with a very large door, which is opening to the landscape and to the river. And I think it would be,
Okay. So yes, we're very looking forward to see the first plan and the first photo of this museum. But I mean, we were talking before, Greg, about the education and how important it was, the space. So can you share with us the importance of dedicated space for? I mean, you at the orchestra, you said, I mean, inside and outside. How do you work with the space? Because right now it's everything which is about gathering is an issue with COVID. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, look, it's been in some ways it's been if I can look for a silver lining in COVID-19, and it's a very, very difficult search. But one thing that it has forced us to do is to pivot very quickly from being a traditional live performance producer to a digital content producer. And there's nowhere a better example of that is with our education. And I spoke earlier about the fact that Queensland is the most decentralised state in Australia and takes up about a third of the size of Australia. So it's a very large state with a spread out population, which is it's impossible for us to be able to on an annual basis get to that population. But what COVID-19 has done is it's forced us to really speed up the process of how we use digital content and how do we use social media in order to get our content, our education programs out into the regions. And through a partnership with the Queensland Education Department, we've been able to expand those programs exponentially and go to many communities that we've never been to before in our 80-year history. And that will continue. So we will continue and revert back to doing our traditional education programs in our studio space and in the Queensland Performing Arts Centre performance spaces. But we will continue to use digital content, continue to use digital technology to take our programs across the state. And one good example of that is our Prodigy project for gifted Year 11 and Year 12 students, which is generally limited to a small number of communities each year. This year, because everything had to be online, we were able to expand that right across the state. So teachers were able to identify and nominate talented students who would do a virtual duet with a QSO musician, have a master class, have some online tutorials, and then perform side by side with a QSO musician through digital content. So that's been and those relationships will continue to build and develop, and that's one example of 50 or 60 I can give you around the way in which we've been able to turn COVID-19 into some sense of a positive.
Thank you, Greg. Joanna, at Melbourne, Melbourne has been under a very serious lockdown during the COVID. Were you able to, like Greg, to switch to a digital content very quickly and to engage with a new audience?
Yes, absolutely, and that's the fascinating thing about this crisis. As the Australians are very good to see the opportunity in every crisis and to adapt and show resilience. And we moved everything online, 100% online since March. And we probably carry on till March 2021 only online, and afterwards.
You have a new. Did you catch a new audience?
Yes, completely. We reached out more people than we did when we were on site, because we have all the regional Victoria, and thanks to our partnership with the Department of Education and Training, we have all the schools in the region that are joining in and that we are able to reach out to them. So we are designing new courses and meetings, also cultural meetups. For that.
And did you lose your core audience, who was used to come to the site?
As well, not all of them, but most of them. So that's the interesting thing, is that we really did some education to help also the ones that were more remotely in terms of technology, especially the kids, young kids and elderly people. But it's interesting, and we were able also to do more in terms of meeting up with artists. And we kind of have a more intimate relationship with artists, because we go to their rehearsal rooms, to their homes. So it's very it's remote, but it's quite close at the same time. So I think our community has been enjoying that. And there is also a joint effort with all the Alliance Française in Australia. It's a 30 organization, non-for-profits, 6 in the capitals and 24 in regional areas, and to do projects together to reach out to more Australians. So that was exciting. That is exciting.
Thank you, Joanna. Hélène, I know, I mean, the festival has a very international fame and many international partnership, like with Orange as well. What is your strategy now that it's going to open very soon next year? So what is your strategy? Is it a different strategy, I suppose, from the one you would have done without COVID? How do you manage it?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the success formula that we've had over with our joint artistic directors Neil Armfield and Rachel Healy is just impossible in COVID. But we were very fortunate at the Adelaide Festival that our festival was fully delivered. So our last event this year was concluded 1 hour before the restriction on mass gatherings came into play in Australia.
Wow.
So we have essentially been planning the next festival, which will start on the 26th of February next year, since COVID. And we were probably one of the first festivals that actually went into the next festival planning, knowing that we were planning in a COVID world. So in that sense, we've been very fortunate. And of course, we have to completely review what we're going to do. But one of the things that we have been very keen on, and we made this decision very early on, was that the Adelaide Festival has always been a celebration of the combination of international, national and local art. And we did not want to lose the international focus just because the borders were closed. So we've had to think really, I guess, in a way cleverly, although many other people are doing it as well. How do we keep that international flavour in the Adelaide Festival next year? How do we bring international artists virtually if they can't be here physically? Or what elements of the international productions can we bring and what elements can we deliver digitally? And so that's, I guess that's to be announced on the 19th of November. But, we will literally be going from well over 230 international artists at the festival this year to, if we're very lucky, a dozen next year. But that's a dozen physically, not necessarily a dozen as part of the festival. And of course, we've used that opportunity as well to reconnect much more deeply within the local artistic community and to support local artists. And there's been a lot of South Australian artists, probably like everybody else in Australia, that have come home from overseas because of necessity, but also that Australia is their home and it is a great place to be. And they've been making work. And the amount of work that is out there at the moment, the artists just don't stop. They have to keep creating. And so we have been the beneficiaries, or we will be even in the next 2 years, the beneficiaries of a wealth of creative work that may potentially not have been possible and had come online so quickly if it wasn't for COVID.
So how many visitors did you have at the last festival?
So we have about a quarter of our visitors would come from international and interstate. We are hoping that that number will stay up, but in total we had about an attendance of 390,000.
Wow.
Now that is again impossible from a physical point of view because we're at 50% in capacity in venues, but it has on another side made us think more cleverly, I guess, about how do we actually reach more audiences, as Craig and others have mentioned. And of course, the great thing about a festival is that it is during summer, or autumn. The weather is great. It's fantastic in Adelaide to be outdoors. And of course, our health authorities love the fact that we're thinking about outdoor spaces and utilising outdoor spaces even more because it's safer. And so we've had to think about how do we bring what would be traditionally on stage inside a theatre outside. And that is, I think, one of the really refreshing ideas. It's almost allowed us to break those reins of that, as Craig said, that traditional sense of performance and delivery to something that we hope audiences will be really embrace and will really flock to. But the thing around a festival and others that we really do want to retain is that live community experience. It's the coming together of people, because that is what gives, for us, the vibrancy of the festival.
Nicola, how are you going to make that work? What Elaine was just saying, the balance between the inside and the outside. I mean, as an architect, how are you going to manage that with the future powerhouse?
Yes, actually, going back to this idea of in-between space, like a space where people can gather and invent themselves within the museum and engage themselves. Here we have been pushing for a direction which is to combine a system of natural ventilation. So it is something that we have been able to develop with the help of the infrastructure New South Wales and the engineer team here in Australia, Europe. So there is this idea that we can bring the fresh air and ventilate and make a chimney kind of principle. So all this circulation, which is facing the river, during the moment that it's not too hot, will be naturally ventilated. And this system, which has been invented, meanwhile there was a COVID also, will definitely be a good, I guess, and comfortable situation for the public.
Okay, and are you, I mean, like many other organizations, are you engaging with local communities? How are you going to work with the local communities?
The principle of the future facility is to have very large platform, what we call hyper platform, free of columns. So these spaces are able to accommodate any kind of pieces, of art pieces. There is such as immersive room or theater configuration or just white box, also rooms with light. So all these different typology of rooms will be able to accommodate different type of artistic venue, which is, as probably Elaine is developing. Lisa, which is a director, is aiming to have this diversity within the museum.
So we've seen a lot in the past years before COVID. The Royal Academy in London, the LACMA in Los Angeles, and many places to become more a campus, a laboratory. Joanna, do you have examples of these kind of new experiences where we are now not, a space for multidisciplinary type of arts? It's not just visual arts, but it's performing arts, it's everything together. So we feel like more and more we have this type of, campus style of organization. What is your experience?
Yes, absolutely. We can see that there is more and more emerging spaces, very different depending where they are seated or grounded, depending on the history of the community and the local city. And it's, most of the time it's interdisciplinary. You also have very broad range of stakeholders, both private and public. There is generally a huge component on education, no matter the level of education and mediation. You can have mix of scientists, artists, so sometimes it's more of a lab, sometimes it's more of a camp, it's indoor, outdoor. There is very different kinds of camps. There is a big one in Aix-en-Provence that is called the Camp, obviously. But you can find some in Paris, Bordeaux, in all the cities, and more in also rural areas. So that's quite interesting to have those emerging, because it's a space to showcase art and culture, where you can be immersed in a way, but it's also a space to create together. And you can have the whole process involving different communities, artists, non-artists, companies, and they would really co-create projects throughout residencies or time workshops. You have, I don't know if you've heard about the Grosses Têtes, where they build cardboard giant puppets with the communities, and then they just they build it with the people, and then they burn it. So it's a very
from Nantes?
Yes, it's a long project, and it takes time, so people have time to bond together. It's visually very poetic and engaging, and you have a whole experience both for the artist and the citizen, from the city. So it's
Craig, do you have a similar experience? And when Elaine was talking about the scope of opportunities, we feel like now there are more opportunities than before because of the digital, and that there are so many things to be done. So how do you feel about, do you feel like, Elaine, with you have the orchestra, with the digitally you can expand to a new audience and build many a new horizon for you? So is it the same in Brisbane?
Yes, I think it is. I think that there's never any, and I think it's exactly what Elaine was saying, is that there is never any substitute for a community of people coming together in the same room to experience a piece of art. So and we are in a very fortunate position where we are back performing with 50% houses and starting to share the art from our musicians once again. But certainly it has made us think about how do we, from a physical perspective, how do we take our music to where the people are, rather than insisting that they come to us on an ongoing basis. And part of that's digital, but also, we, in partnership with the Brisbane Festival, we recently put a group of music, created a stage on a flatbed truck, and then toured around the city in the cul-de-sacs and did impromptu performances in suburbs for communities. So there are those sorts of opportunities that you start to think about, well, how do we engage and how do we take the music physically to where the audiences are potentially are, and we're looking at how we expand that going forward into an ongoing suburban program. But it's also looking at whatever opportunities there might be, and I guess one of the ways in which we've been trying to position ourselves over a period of time is that we are seen as indispensable in the community, and the community looks to us for key civic moments. And I'm pleased to say that there's a major football grand final in Brisbane this weekend, and the first act that was secured to perform at the grand final was the Queensland Symphony Orchestra. And that was kind of a directive from the Queensland government, is no, this is our orchestra, this is from our community, we want them to be a part of it. So it's how do we position ourselves in the minds of the community and the civic leaders so that they look to us in those key moments to play a role and to step up, and we're delighted to be able to do that.
Coming back to the topic about the unspoken success factors for livable cities, Elaine, how would you consider giving an answer to the global issues that we are facing about the Black Lives Matter, the bushfires, the environment, the climate change? What is your response to this big issue as a festival?
Yes, that's a big question, Corinne.
Oh, I know.
I think it's something that we do grapple with, and I think that, in one word, I guess the word that would sum it up for me, and I think for many of us, the team at the Adelaide Festival, is relevance. A festival must continue to be relevant to its community and to the world. And regardless of the challenges that we're facing with COVID and however long it may continue, we must remain relevant to the global as well as the local issues. So for us, We are very proudly a carbon neutral multi-arts festival. COVID has in many ways even made us consider even more what that means, because even though we will purchase carbon offsets and we're very proud of our sustainability and our environmental goals, we are now thinking, well, hang on, we've also been flying everywhere and we actually don't need to do that anymore, because we now have another option, and that the audience has very, very much embraced. So that relevance for me is very important.
How do you respond to that, Nicola? How are unspoken success factors for livable cities?
There is probably many answers possible, and but so if we go to back to sustainability and when you do architecture, you are using carbon basically, and some people will say like to be efficient or not sustainable. That point would be not to build. So probably the best answer to say is to, when we build, we have to build as much as beautiful, so it will long and last, and then it will become sustainable. If you do cheap and quick and without considering the possibility of evolution, it will not last, as it is not sustainable. So this is very the message. Let's make it things beautiful and consistent.
Okay, and I mean, I like the idea about being relevant to the world and to the local. I mean, at the same time, answering local and international issues. How do you face that issue, Joanna?
Sorry, Corinne, can you repeat the question?
Yes. I mean, Hélène was saying, to be relevant to in your program and to stay consistent and to answer the local community and also the global issue. I mean, you have to be relevant to the worldwide issue, but at the same time, you have to be relevant to your local community. So how do you manage that at the Alliance Française?
Well, the Alliance Française is a non-for-profit organization that is very much grounded into the local community, because it's run by a board of directors that are locals. Just the general manager is sent by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so sometimes it's a local as well. And we had to actually rethink and reshape all our programs. And I think we are becoming smarter and more creative, because those constraints are driving our innovation. So, for instance, instead of having, a once-off one show, nowadays it's a no-no. So we are thinking more of residency programs that will have, artists coming for a longer period of time, less artists, but co-creating with people, with local artists. We are also to have more tours within Australia, and to have, hybrid projects which involve a part online and a part on-site. So it's really, we have to do more together with more stakeholders, and recreate really the way we used to do things.
Craig, what is your answer about, international, global issues and local issues? How do you handle that?
Yeah, look, I think it's certainly from the Black Lives Matter really made us think very clearly about where, are we part of the solution, or in fact, are we part of the problem? And having that really challenging conversation. I think it's fair to say that orchestras are perceived as being for the white privileged. So how do we make, exactly what Elaine's saying, how do we make our orchestra relevant? How does it reflect the community in which we serve? So that really made us forced us to, and we were very keen to go there to look at how can we meaningfully engage with First Nations communities in Brisbane, but also across Queensland. How can we do that with artists? What role can we play, and how do we take our programs into schools? how do we generationally change the makeup of orchestras, the way in which First Nations communities engage with orchestras, and who can we work with in the local community to be champions for us.
What about you staff members? Have you changed the profile since we have all these the big concerns about diversity?
Yeah, look, what we have done is that we haven't changed the profile of our staff members, but what we have done is in developing a First Nations program is that we've gone out to First Nations producers. So we've actually gone to the community and we've asked them to work with us, and we've employed them to come on the journey to help us, to guide us on the journey, so that it becomes something that grows out of the First Nations communities, not something that is imposed upon them.
Yes. So when you mean, Elaine, when you mean relevance, are you talking as well, like Craig, guidance from the First Nations people?
Oh, absolutely. But I think across all communities Australia is one of the most multicultural communities in the world, and yet the representation possibly in the larger arts organisations doesn't reflect that. But the first step, I think, is to make sure that we have the conversations internally, as Craig said. We're consciously trying to reach out. First Nations is extremely important for, I think, all Australians, but we have a long way to go to really understand what those connections are. And it's always going to be challenging from us who come from a larger organisation. We come from a place of privilege. And we have to step back and not really. I think Craig's response with the Brisbane Festival was such an amazing project to bring the music to a place where people feel comfortable and can engage, and I think that's where we have to go. We have to work with those communities and not ask them to come to our traditional concert halls, but to go out to their communities, and that's First Nations, but that's also right across the Asian Australian communities and a lot of others that are coming through, and that's where I think the relevance does come, because those communities could possibly, dealing with issues that maybe haven't made our main stage yet, but should.
Okay.
You need to earn we talk about the fact that you have to earn their support. And for the First Nations, we from the board down, we are working through, and we understand that this is a 10-year project. Yeah. We need to make a commitment for the next 10 years. And because there aren't going to be any quick results, we want something that's going to be meaningful, that's going to be long-lasting, and have a real legacy in those communities. So we have to make sure that we take the time in order to build it properly, and to earn the right.
I'm surprised you say. I mean, the world is changing so fast, Greg. I'm surprised you're talking about a 10-year plan.
With these communities, there are so many people who come to these communities with lots of promises and seeking quick fixes, and they've become quite rightly very cynical about people's intentions. So you have to build a level of trust and confidence over a long period of time. When I was at the West Australian Symphony Orchestra, where I was for 10 years, we ran a program in schools, an Elsa Stemmer-inspired program, which started in pre-primary and is now in every year of the school. But it took time in order to build the confidence of the parents, the confidence of the students. It's mostly a First Nations community students or migrant students, often in very difficult social circumstances. To build that confidence and the trust and that longevity in that community, it takes some time. But the outcome is extraordinary in terms of the results from my dog. Sorry about that. In terms of the education outcomes, the social outcomes, the confidence, all the positive elements that come out of that, and setting those kids up for a much more successful high school years.
And rewarding.
Yeah. We have in Australia we have a annual national program of assessment of students and where they fit locally, from a state perspective and a national perspective. And for these kids, the first lot of pre-primary, when they reached those first testing, they scored the highest of any kids in that school ever, any kids in the region, in that school district ever. And the principals placed it down to the music education program. But it takes time and it takes commitment.
Well, so trust, time, and education, it are really your key values to drive your organization. So we only have 5 minutes to go to finish, to wrap up everything. So I would like to ask each one of you your key learning for livable cities. I know it's quite a bit challenging, but if we can remember one message, what would it be? Elaine, do you want to start? I know you talk a lot about relevance and visual continuity.
No, my key learning for a livable city, I think is it would be space. It would be space. And I mean that in a very broad term. Space to be yourself, space to understand your community, space to sit outdoor, to be indoor. There is something about Australia and the sense of space that makes it feel very livable.
Thank you. Joanna.
To create a livable city, for me, it's really to create cultural democracy. Cultural democracy where the new patrons are everybody, the First Nations, the kids, the newcomers, the oldcomers, everybody, to be really inclusive. And as Elaine said, space is important, and as well, it's spaceless. Nowadays, the limit is the sky. We can do art in the sky. We can do art on the clouds. It can be anywhere. So it's everywhere and anywhere at the same time. And I think art is more contagious than anything. And if there is one strength, it's really the power of creativity and innovation. And that's in everybody's hands. And we can achieve livable cities thanks to art and culture. And if you want a bit of French, the Alliance Française are all over Australia to help you do the bridge and link you up with the relevant people out there.
And art is an amazing way to engage dialogue between everyone.
It's a language,
of course,
like music and French.
So space, democracy. For you, Nicolas, what is the message?
I think space was very good work. For so.
Yes.
And I would precise it probably.
You have to find something else. Space was taken already.
I will define it. I will call it the in-between space. And the in-between space is a space that you haven't defined the content. So it is a space where there is generosity, where the people can gather, when they can meet, they can commit, and then the social activity can work. So that would be my key learning.
Yes, build the dialogue between the spaces. Craig, can we finish with you?
Yes, thank you. Look, I think my advice for arts organisations in working in a livable city or contributing to a livable city is firstly listen to the community that you serve, evolve with the community that you serve, and don't be afraid to lead the community that you serve.
Very good, very nice way to wrap up everything. So we talk a lot about space, about generosity, about listening to your communities and respecting your communities. So thank you so much to all of you for sharing your time and sharing your thoughts, to come for this 1-hour panel. And I want to say thank you to the FACHI, the French-Australian Chamber of Commerce, for organizing this panel, and also to Schneider Electric for the support to bring this conference together. So thanks again to all of you. It was great, and I was very fortunate to moderate that panel. And have a lovely day and a lovely evening, everyone. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.